Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to the Mel Blackwell Experience on this December 18th, the year of our Lord 2025, 1 week from Christmas. So I want to get started. Just love Jimmy Stewart. Love is a Wonderful Life. And I found this clip of him talking about making the movie. So let's listen to Jimmy Stewart.
What about getting back into movies? Because you started with a bang, didn't you, with a marvelous movie made by Frank Capra. It's a Wonderful Life. How did that? I mean, did you want to get back into the movies?
Oh, I certainly did.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a nebulous period in my career because I didn't exactly know whether the type of thing that I'd done before, whether that would be accepted. And it turned out that it wasn't very accepted. It's a Wonderful Life didn't do very well.
Didn't it?
And the next picture didn't do very well. And it was sort of falling back on that sort of thing that I'd gotten into, the romantic comedy, and people didn't want that.
Yeah. So but before you go on then, Jimmy, come have a look at the scene then from Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, in fact, that it wasn't a commercial success, because it's a nice little movie, isn't it?
But it's amazing. It's my favorite picture and Frank Capra's favorite picture.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Dear Father in heaven, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there and you can hear me, show me the way. I'm at the end of my rope. Show me the way, oh God. Are you all right, George? Want somebody to take you home?
Why you drink so much, my friend? Please go home, Mr. Bailey. This is Christmas Eve.
Bailey? Which Bailey?
This Mr. George Bailey. You said, Jimmy, that was your favorite movie of all.
Mm.
Of all the movies you've made, that's still remembered. Why is that?
I don't know. A lot of reasons. I just noticed that scene there. That scene, I remember when I first read the first draft of the script, and that scene, the little prayer, affected me. And when I read it first, when I did it in the movie, it did, and it did the same to me right now. And this is a theory that I've always had, that creating moments in movies, this, I think, is the important thing. Nobody knows exactly how it happens. But what you should do is to prepare yourself as best you can to make these moments happen. Because in a movie, it's really not so much the performance. It's really not. There are moments. There are moments, just like there, I think.
Wow. It's just wonderful. So that was an interview he did with Michael Parkinson in March of 1973. So the movie was released in 1946. So you're looking at almost 30 years later, I guess. Is that right? Yeah. And very fascinating. So for him, I want to tie this into, of course, it's Christmas, which is wonderful. This would be I don't see me doing another podcast before Christmas, since I just about took a month off there. But full disclosure, I've been working on the manuscript for my book and other things, and it's been a little bit hard to focus on the podcast, so my apologies. But I appreciate everybody being patient. What I want to do today, now looking at business best practice, coming out of what Jimmy Stewart's saying, is he's looking to make those moments on film, those memorable things. And like he said, sometimes you don't know you even did them. You don't know they are going to connect until they do. And in that scene where he's at the bar and he starts praying, that was an ad lib. It wasn't in the script where he would, and he said he just kind of was overwhelmed with that feeling of being in character and being, sitting there and that just came to him. So he said that prayer as if that's what he would have done if he were the character, and then the movie is wonderful. So we for the second year in a row, we've gone to the Alabama Theater and watched one of the very few actual showings in a theater of It's a Wonderful Life. And it's so cool. So we do it as, Gwen and I and the kids, and it's fun. It's really fun. And they're all grown, and everybody, turns little for a minute, eats popcorn and watches It's a Wonderful Life on the old original, screens, like the Alabama Theater of old. But it was really interesting. So how this applies to business, I want to take up kind of a controversial topic because it's important. And it's interesting that, me coming out of what was a master's degree from the University of Alabama in what was back then a new field called organizational development, which was in the Department of Human Resources. And so therefore, to get that organizational development degree, one had to take somewhat of a mix of MBA classes, the organizational development specific management classes, and then some human resources, curriculum like labor law and just kind of understanding the basics of managing the human resource. So in the 1990s, that was very different than today. It was pre-DEI. But what was coming out of the 80s and 90s is you were getting into, you began to have reverse discrimination. You had quotas. You had incentives that were starting to show up in and around hiring minorities. And it really was the beginning of, there was some discrimination going into being a man at all, white or black. Excuse me. And then particularly for a white male, a lot of times you just went to the bottom of the interview thing. So I remember coming out. So you had the Americans with Disability Act, which was new. That was coming into law in the early 90s. And then you had HR departments beginning to drive, kind of taking it away from the operators and saying, hey, we need to do these things. We need to be more diverse. So it was the beginning of diversity. And so at the risk of being controversial, which I'm going to be, I just want to kind of tackle this from the best practice standpoint. So the point I'm making is coming out of graduate school in the early 90s, I wasn't really facing DEI, but I remember myself. So coming out, there were several female students, and there was there was a black female student. And to be full disclosure, these were some sharp girls. They were really sharp. So they were very deserving of the attention to maybe, companies coming in and wanting to hire them. But what I noticed was it was kind of a sight unseen. It didn't really matter. Some of the biggest companies, some of the best like Amoco and some of those companies that are coming out that if you wanted to use that degree to go into human resources roles, they were not interested in white dudes. And, of course, me being a white dude, I was like, well, dang, man. I was like, that's not fair. But to be fair, these were really sharp candidates. So the white female girls, the one single black female girl, they were fantastic options. And so it didn't really hurt my feelings, but I thought to myself, and I couldn't even get the interview. They were like, no, and at least, my professors at the time, they were like, you just studied all this stuff, man. They're hiring the females and in particular black female. And then obviously you also saw we had a couple of black gentlemen that were in there and they were exceedingly high demand too. So I could see it's like, wow, people are being hired for something besides their qualifications. But I'm going to say it again. These were all qualified people. So I just thought to myself, oh, well, it's the luck of the draw. So I did fine. I went on and did my thing. But as this has evolved now for 30 plus years, it really has gone into this kind of crazy DEI thing where you hire people for something besides merit. And I think that starts in school. That's where people getting positions into qualified college programs, getting scholarships. and it's just wrong. And I think you're going to see a major pushback now, hopefully forever, to get away from discrimination of any kind. And so the best practice that I want to talk about is in the hiring, being colorblind, being racial, gender blind, and going after the best people. Now, there's sometimes you may say, I really want to get a handsome gentleman for that role because you feel like it's part of what works best for the role. Okay, that's fine. If it's truly role based, or if you remember the pharmaceutical reps of, say, the 90s, they were all good looking girls, and obviously it worked with a lot of predominantly male doctors. And so I think all of that can go into part of what you're trying to cast. It is a role, you're trying to cast somebody into it, but to just categorically discriminate against an entire class of people always was wrong, is still wrong, always will be wrong. And so I don't know if you've seen some of these statistics. It's all over the conservative media, but Jacob Savage wrote an article called The Lost Generation, and it provides a pretty solid evidence-based background on the discrimination against white men, particularly during the post-2008. So kind of coming out of the Obama election between, say, 2008 to today, it has decimated the opportunities for white men. And systematically alongside that, if you think about, just remember the two seats we've talked about before, if you can get up really high and sit in one of those two seats, the highest of high seats is God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Okay, but then under that is this demonic turd, Lucifer, who sits there. And in that seat, as high up as he is the maestro that's controlling all of this bad music. And sometimes these strange bedfellows are just an old play, new days, old ways for the devil. And so at the same times that you can oppress, beat down, kind of wimp down, take the gumption out of white men, at a time where a lot of the good that's been done all over the world in the history of mankind, you don't just want to throw out white men. I mean, they've done a lot of good and a lot of bad, but my point being that along with the oppression of these white men and them not getting the opportunities for college, not getting the opportunities in college for various different roles, then not getting opportunities in jobs. I'll give you the data, and the statistics is wild. But at the same time, you're telling females, you don't need men. You can go out. They're breaking the order that God had of a man and a woman getting married and having a family and having roles, and not going back to barefoot and pregnant. I'm not saying that, but you still have a very important role during those childbearing and child rearing years for mom to be a mom. And if you dethrone dad and make him a wuss, an incapable wuss, he can't get good work. He's not getting the opportunities. Opportunities are going to women. Well, the women are the ones that are wanting to stay home and have the kids, but their deadbeat, white husband maybe isn't, able to go out and get a job. And so what I want you to do is to be able to see all of that happening at once. Remember the feel, the hear, and the see. Don't be fooled by all this. All this goes together to do great harm to society. It does great harm. Look at the kids. Look at all of the issues with kids, with kids coming out and they're not getting out of the nest. They're living in mom and dad's house until they're 26, 28, 30. They don't, they're all riddled with different, issues and health issues, and they shouldn't have them at that age. And then, so when you have all of these different things happening, the business best practice is, hey, you have a responsibility as a good shepherd at work. In my opinion, you hire the most qualified person for the job. Get away from this horse crap, DEI, that tells you that somebody in some HR department or somebody at some NGO or somebody with some money that you can qualify for if you'll just go along with DEI. You've got to break that cycle because it's wrong. And if you go back to the days of anybody doing anything wrong in terms of race and gender, there's always incentive to do wrong. It wasn't the wrong, quote unquote, thing to do in that day, but it was freaking wrong and it shouldn't have been done. So here, let's just turn it around and reverse discriminate now. So check out some of these statistics. It's a little bit mind boggling. So In the media journalism world, from 2013 to 24, the Atlantic is a journal that looked into this, saw male staff drop from 53% to 36%. Okay, that's just male staff, black, white, or indifferent. And the white staff dropped from 89% to 66%. Post-2020, hires skewed heavily towards women and people of color, 75% women and 69% people of color. And so at this point, as of 2024, only 7.7% white men in Los Angeles Times internships since 2020. And so that's really staggering. So, it's not like all of a sudden white men weren't good hires or weren't capable, but they've been being told you're masculine, your toxic masculinity. They're beat into a system that doesn't necessarily represent reality for men and boys. Black boy, white boy, green boy, yellow boy. It doesn't matter. Boys are boys. They take a little longer to mature. They mentally are mature in their late 20s, early 30s. And young women mature sooner. But academia at Harvard, the tenure track, hires from white men fell from 39% in 2014 to 18% in 23, went down 21%. At UC Irvine, only 3 of 64 hires since 2020 were white men. Yale hired just 7.9% white American men in humanities professor roles since 2018. So, there's really strong DEI language in and around these institutions, and it's really illegal to discriminate with people solely based on color, but they have. And so in entertainment, on the TV writers, okay, white men from 48% entry level in 2011 to 11.9%. So they were 48% entry level white men hired in 2011 to down to only 11.9% in 2024. I mean, that's staggering. Disney's fellowship program awarded 107 spots over a decade, 0 to white men. And so that's really wild. And so other sectors, law school, all right, 31.2% white men in 2016 to 25% in 2024. Medical school, 31% white men in 2014 to 20% in 2025. In tech, Google's white male workforce dropped from nearly half to under a third, so from 50% to around 30%. Amazon's mid-level managers went from 56% to 34% white men. And so what's fascinating in all this is when you start talking about, like, people will cut these deals. So this for those men during this period, white men during this period that were over 40 years of age, it did not affect them at all. So it's like they went into this world, the white men, okay, along with all other race and creeds of and genders of people, but the white men of themselves look like they cut the best deal because they're discriminating against the whole generation coming out, looking for college placement, looking for then, getting their first jobs and second jobs and third jobs and promotability. The white men locked in their status, and you don't see these same trends for, men that were 40 years or older in 2008. And so it's almost like they sold out their own people so they went along with all these DEI policies. And now, the question is do you see a better world out there? Do you see more qualified people in all these different roles? Or did we lower the standards for something other than, who was the best hire? And I'll tell you, it's obvious to me as the nose on our faces that we've lowered our standards and we've just done something utterly stupid. And so it's not about saying you should put white people ahead of anybody. I'm saying you just shouldn't consider what color somebody is or their gender unless it's really part of the role. And so millennial white men born between 1981 and 1996 have really faced the 30 to 60% decline in opportunities, which is astounding. And so, I don't know that you've seen that or you have a story, but what it does, the impact of that is now you have, men and women marrying less. They're marrying later in life. The female has more opportunity in the workforce than the man. So for men, it's like, well, I really want to get married and take care of my family, but is it a fair level playing field for that man to go out there and really get the job, to allow his wife to be able to maybe work less or work part-time or not have to carry the burden of breadwinner while they're in childbearing and rearing years? And these are opportunities that society should be able, you should be able to make that decision as a free man and woman. It shouldn't be placed on you by a pre-baked, rigged system. So the best practice here for those of us that are good shepherds is, remember, you're teaching people at work more than just how to work. They're looking to you for even morals, like what's right and wrong. What's right and wrong? Is it right to discriminate against black men? No. Is it right to discriminate against Asian men? No. Is it right to discriminate against women and not give them the same opportunities as men just because they're women? No. So my point is making a list of what's right is right, and then doing the right thing the right way is what you should do as the leader of your business. And if you have an HR department that's trying to push discrimination under the guises of DEI, just stare them down. And, they may be on the other side of the rope. I think there comes a very important time now in America for businessmen and women to look over at the HR department and say, hey, if you guys went full turd on me and got in this DEI world, then as far as I'm concerned, that's the other side of the rope. The right thing, the right way is colorblind, gender blind. Let's go hire the right people. It comes more down into we've taken care of things. We've developed this role. Nowhere in developing that role should you be discriminating. So then I've developed the role and I say, let's get the right person in the right seat. Who's the right person? I don't want somebody to come in and go, here are all your applicants, and you just don't realize they just culled out all the white dudes, or they just culled out all the black guys, or they just said we need to hire. We don't want to hire any white or black women, we have to hire other kind of woman. It's like, no. Who's the best person for this role? And that leadership, that power has to come from the senior executive team to say it's not right, we're not going to do it. So the best practice here is right thing the right way. Okay, the right thing the right way. So is it the right thing? Okay, what's the right way to do it? And so that becomes the best practice in hiring. So it's not a major change to anything we've talked about, but you have to wonder, how does one get dragged into these stupid situations where we are going down the path? And, even I was guilty of it when it first came out. Everybody like, diversity's our strength. Diversity's our strength. Diversity's your strength. You're a lot more strong if you're diverse. And it's like, okay, well, let's challenge that against real best practices. You might be able to be very diverse and be strong, but that is not how you become strong. Because remember, when we talked about the Tower of Babel, and we talk about the ability to build a resounding culture, you have to have one vision shared by all, that everybody is united and they're on the same page. And then you have to have a common language that everybody can speak. And that vision includes the destination vision of where you're going. We beat that horse to death last week or last episode. But then you have the sub-vision, which is how. So it's the overarching vision. The visionary is, where are we going? What's the destination? What's the big thing? What's our why? Why are we doing this? But then under that is, okay, how are we going to get there? What's the journey? Can we believe in those people leading us to that final destination? Will they get us there? Question mark, full stop. How? How will they get us there? So you got to get a buy-in to that. So that's important. That's how you get traction. You get traction by you have a solid destination that everybody in the business is 100% locked in on the same side of the rope. That's where we're going. You have your culture. You have your core values. Everybody's on board with all that. And then you have the how are we going to do it? The day-to-day, the week-to-week, the quarter-to-quarter, the year-to-year journey for how we're going to get there. And that's where best practice comes in, and that's where my book, Uncommon Sense, comes in. And that's how we are going to be the best we can be. That's where the best pledge comes in. You're going to do your best work alongside me doing my best work. And hey, just one more thing. I need you to be the best version of yourself you can possibly be. Not perfect, but I need you to be conscious. I need you to take care of things. So in all of that, Nowhere in that is diversity your strength, because diversity could very well be what fragments your vision. Diversity could very well be what makes it damn near impossible to communicate together, because people aren't from the same, mindset of how to communicate, or they don't. You see what I'm saying? And so the real heartbeat of this thing is you've got to get the right people. You should be colorblind and gender blind. You get the right people, and then they have to be able to. And how do you know they're right? Well, they unite behind the destination vision. They commit to you that they can do their best work, and they commit to you that, yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to be my best self. They agree with you that mediocrity is not good enough. They agree with you that your core values resonate with them. They agree with you that if they're the right person, they can wear that tag on their shirt that says, "Make me feel special." Last thing you want to do is ask a cobra, to wear a tag that says, "Make me feel special." If they're a bandito, get them the hell out of the business. I don't care what tag they got on. Your tag's a gone ass badge, so get on out of here. And I'm not being mean, but it's true. Somebody's got to pick up the staff and be the shepherd. And so once you have that all in place, then you can really build the best pledge. You can really build if you're not wrecking, you're not riding. But I don't buy into, and even though when it first came out, I mean, seriously, I would say it. And I thought, I guess that, that makes a lot of sense. But it's not true. Diversity is not your strength. Diversity can be your downfall. Diversity can be an outcome. Diversity, you can look up and have a diverse team as something that just organically happened, but they better be united behind the same vision. They better be able to get united behind the sub-vision of the journey and how we're going to get there, and the hard work and the tenacity and what it's going to take, and being a good person and doing your best work and being your best self. All of that is more important than quote unquote diversity. And so if you end up with a diverse team, well, good for you. But it's not something you start out with and you say, well, that's what I'm going to do, because what you really need to do, your obligation as the shepherd, is to give people solid players that fit the structure that are going to get us to where we want to go. And so I hope that's very helpful. And, it rolls into a little bit of what I want to talk about now. Is there's just so much stuff going on. It's almost impossible to figure out what to talk about. But I did find something that I think is interesting, and we'll shift gears into that. I'll see what you guys think about it. All right. So let's look at I put out a blog post earlier. I'm changing my site around too, so people are telling me you click on it and it goes nowhere. So, oops, progress. I put out a blog post that was called "New Days, Old Ways, Same Desired Outcome," and it harped back to some of the same things we've talked about. That only 3 to 3.5% of humans have ever lived in a free, self-ruled society. So that means 96% have lived ruled as subjects. And then there are some interesting papers out there about the perpetual enclosure, feudal oppression, digital tyranny. And the thing on this was, once again, getting up in that real high up so that you can look down and you can see all of these different things that are going on. And they're undeniably linked, okay? And so from the beginning of history until today, there has been a ruling class, and most of the freedoms in the world to try the experiment of a republic, a real republic, where you've got a constitution and it's not just set up to be, the flavor of the day, and next thing you know, you're back to being ruled. But America is a short-lived country in the total scheme of history, and it's interesting that the status quo is to have rulers. And here we are, a free country with the freedoms, and we're getting into all of this crap where we've flooded our cities with illegal immigrants that come from some of the most, they're just not going to mesh in the American culture. So when we talk about a business and we say we want to find people that fit our culture, well, do you think a country's any different? Like, is there anything wrong with Sweden remaining Sweden? Is there anything wrong with Zimbabwe remaining Zimbabwe? Is there anything wrong with, Hawaii remaining Hawaiian? I mean, it's either that or nothing. I mean, you either stand for your heritage and what makes you different in your culture, or you're just going to have this homogenized cow crap. And so, you've got the standard is pharaohs and emperors and feudal lords, communists, theocrats, that take over and exploit mankind. That's what they do. And so what's fascinating is if you say, all right, well, is there any kind of an overlap? Like, let's look at some of the strange bedfellows. And let's ask yourself this question. Why are the same elite ruling class simultaneously engaged in climate authoritarianism, food authoritarianism, vaccine authoritarianism, citizens' rights limitation, third world migrant invasions forced on sovereign people, reimagining criminal, acceptance and preference over citizens? You've got the elite capture of the judiciary and prosecutors, epistemic capture of medicine, pharmaceuticals, and then our oversight institutions are corrupt. And then you wrap all that up in a digital ID and credit scoring system that can control behavior and control people. And you say, okay, why would we want to let people get that kind of power over us? And since when have there ever been benevolent rulers on earth? Because there's never been, okay? And then you've got common citizens in Western civilization, just common people that are being raped and murdered, even their kids. And just the expectation of safe and secure, people sneer at you like that's hate speech. And you're like, no, man, I just want to be safe and secure. I can tell a drug den when I look at one. I can tell a pack of thugs walking down the street up to no good when I look at them. And so being able to object and speak up and demand some accountability, depending on which Western nation in which you live right now, you may end up in prison longer than the offender that raped or murdered your loved one. It's really bizarre. And so today when we talk about with Jimmy Stewart, he comes out and he talks about those moments that you make in movies where it just kind of happens and it comes together and it's authentic. It moves him as the actor. It moves the audience as they participate in it and they get to know the character and they become empathetic. And then we talk about business and doing what's right and trying to create a culture so that you can make an impact, so that you can move the hearts and minds and souls of the people in your business, so that you can all be better people and you can do something great together. You can break the chains of mediocrity and sucking, and go be a part of something really big and good. And then you got all of this to deal with in your culture where you got all these strange bedfellows like Bill Gates, okay, World Health Organization with those turds, the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab, I guess he's been kind of moved on or whatever, but he's still the devil. You've got the unelected EU figures like Ursula von der Leyen, as she wants to rule you and control you. And then you've got the UK that has lost their mind, the UK government. Really, really, those European elites are still smarting from this little, baby brother America that breaks away, takes their colonies, creates a big old country over here and gives away all these freedoms. And you can see these tentacles forming back through technology, back through these unholy alliances. Did you guys see that the NGOs, the budget of the NGOs right now that have been operating in America is $14 trillion with a TR, trillion dollars. That is insane. That alone can destroy a sovereign nation. So I'm asking you to see that you have the Bill Gateses, the Ursula von der Leyens, the Stammer, and all these guys, and then you have this whole Green New Deal, which is just rules for thee and not for me. And you've got all this wrapped up in a social scoring and ID system and tracking you. And then we look at DEI and the impact that that's made on, it's decimated what made America great, which is men being men and women being women and getting to a point where discrimination is just, we're beyond that. That's too mediocre. That's crap. Let's move away from that. Let's go forward on merit. Give people, it doesn't matter what color people are. It doesn't matter. And then they say, if you try to say that an illegal immigrant shouldn't be here, well, you're an ist. You're a phobic ist. And it's like, no, I'm not. If the culture, remember what we talked about culture. In the rattlesnake and the baby crib example I give you, the baby crib is your culture. The baby is your business. And the rattlesnake is the bandito that does not fit in your culture, that does not need to be around your business. Well, a country's similar. You've got the baby in the culture of America is the republic. It's what we were inherited when we were born. It's what we want to pass on to our kids. As stewards of the republic, we suck. Look at what we've done. Look at anybody that's older than 30 really needs to look in the mirror and go, we have got to get back control of what we're allowing to happen in our culture, in our country, so that we even have a republic. So at the rattlesnake and the baby crib analogy for our country, the baby crib is our culture, the baby is our republic, and the rattlesnake is anybody or any policies that don't fit within our best pledge in America. If you're going to come to America, you've got to be the best version of yourself you've ever been. You can't come over here and say, I'm not going to assimilate. I'm from Somalia, so I'm just going to come over here and get on the dole, and then I'm going to put all together these piracy schemes, and I'm going to funnel billions of dollars back to my home country. Well, get the hell out of our country, rattlesnake. And that's got to be the way that we think. So a lot of the things that I've put together in business, it does kind of shape my politics because it makes sense to me. I can see it. I can see, well, I've been building these little businesses that in the grand scheme of things, they really don't matter. But a country, the Republic of America, based on ideals that so few people have ever aspired to, if you look at the number of people that actually lived in America as free people, it's just minute. It's a lot less than 3%, right? It's down to under 1%. And America is the bastion of freedom, the city on a hill. And so, I ask you to think about that, but you have these, you have interesting things you can put together. Sumptuary laws were in place that allowed the gentlemen and the ladies to live in such a way that they could consume the best of foods, and the peasants were limited to potatoes and grains and things like that. So there were a couple of things. I'll run these past you, but you had deliberate structures in place that basically the people that worked hard for the fruits of their labor, the fruits went to the rich, and they were exploited, clothing, food, the whole 9 yards. And so, just the whole nobleman thing. And then you had the Great Irish Famine in 1845 to 1852. It killed over 1 million Irish people. And it basically drove all of the Irish men and women that had been able to sustain themselves with a small farm. It pushed them into the cities because they couldn't live off of potatoes, because the potato, they had blight, they had all these different things. And so, what happened there though was fascinating. So they could grow cows and that sort of thing. And that there was twice enough food required to feed all of the citizens of Ireland, and the betters, the elites, wouldn't let it go to feed the people. So they were, you had an ungodly number of people die of starvation, and then they moved into the squalors of the cities. And you say, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, look at what they're doing now. It's the same stuff. They're coming back around with it. They haven't been able to roll this out on us because they didn't have the power or the mechanisms of control, but they do now. So have the unholy alliances been there? Yeah. I mean, they really have, but now they really got it. But, the English landlords owned the land, and the Irish were just tenants that paid rent with produce and livestock, and they were given, potatoes to eat. And so it was population control. They used immense violence. With the Great Irish Famine, the overlords crushed resistance through military might, draconian laws, punitive justice, and it just wasn't fair. And so they put down the uprisings. They stifled free speech. If you spoke up, you just disappeared. And that was in young Ireland, and not too long ago. And so you had the same thing with the enclosure laws, where back in the day, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Anglo-Saxon peasants used terms like cow, pig, sheep, and deer for the animals they were raising with their grueling labor. But post-slaughter, they went to terms like beef, pork, and mutton and venison. Have you ever wondered why they're called different things? Because while they're being grown by the peasants, they're pigs and cows and sheep and deers. But as soon as the rich man gets them to his table, it's beef and pork and mutton and venison. Isn't that something? So for the Norman elite tables, they changed the names. So not only was it, hey, peasant, raise me a pig so that I can invite my friends over and eat some pork. It's like, wow, seriously? I'm not kidding. It's for real. And by the 17th century, with the gentlemen, the ladies, the hypocrisy was massive. And then enclosure acts came around between 1600 and 1914, and it was a brutal escalation. So they had over 5,000 acts in England on the common lands that allowed the wealthy landowners to fence off all those pastures that the peasants used to use for grazing livestock. And, even pre the enclosure laws, poor families had enough access to land to raise, their food. So they had cows for milk, and they had chickens for egg, and they had occasional meat. Post-enclosure, they had to sell all their animals because they didn't have enough land to feed and raise their animals. So they lost protein as their access to protein in just one stroke. So by 1850, nearly all commons were gone, and it displaced millions of English men and women into the slums where they had to work 14-hour days in factories, and their diet was bread and potatoes. So it's like there has been hundreds of years in Europe, right there in England, and it's similar in France, where the betters got all of the cream of the crop of the food and the animals, even to what you called them after your poor ass grew it. My rich ass is going to eat it. I'm going to call it something different. And you're like, wow, this is real. And then you wonder why we're looking at today some of the same old ways coming back around for the same end results, which is control and to push. They don't like us. They don't like common men and women. They don't like upper class, middle class, lower class people. So all of these things, I'm telling you, flooding immigration, DEI, to take men and make them unable to support their families, take women and say, you be the breadwinner because we're going to pay you more. Because first of all, you have to convince everybody they have a grievance so we can all be mad at each other and greedy. So that if there's 2 loaves of bread, I'm getting to thinking that you've treated me wrong, so I'm going to take both loaves of bread. Screw you. And we've been talked into doing the wrong things. Maybe we're doing the wrong things the right way. Maybe we're doing the wrong things the wrong way. But the best practice in business and in living is try to do the right thing the right way. I remember Granddaddy Blackwell, as he got older, he never said a whole lot, but he had that twinkle in his eye and the smile, and everybody loved him because he was just a really, really wise and smart man. But good luck, he wasn't going to say much. And I remember as he was getting older, we'd go by and see Grandma and Granddaddy, and they were always so happy, and they wanted to make sure you're okay. And as we would walk off, as I would walk off, he would look me in the eye, put his hand on my shoulder, and he'd say, Mel, remember, go do something good every day. Go do something for the cause of good every day. You don't have to do anything big. Just do a little something more for good than bad every day. And I would just look at him. I'd be like, I can do that. That's a big charge, but I can do that. And more he would say that the last few years he was alive. And that's what we're talking about. As a business, you look over at DEI and you say, this is mediocre. What in the world are we doing? But you have an HR department that goes, no, we have to do this. We have to follow these rules. We have these grants. If we don't do this, we don't do that. It's like you need to reach into that machine and tear the cords out like a 1980s movie where sparks are going everywhere, and get a fire extinguisher and put out the fire and get those people out of your company. You need anybody that's trying to do DEI or telling you that common sense doesn't work. My book's title is Uncommon Sense, because what was common sense back in the day, just all of a sudden it seems to be so uncommon. Like why can't people just do? Where did common sense go? And so, anyway, I hope that is helpful. This is a really interesting subject that I got on, and then so the next thing I want to talk about is this is a cool lady. Not somebody that I was that familiar with, but I have become so here most recently. But her name is Susan Kokinda. She's with Promethean Action, which is out of Michigan. And she has been around and in the world of the know of corruption in government since the Nixon years, going back into the 70s. And she is so good. And she's going to tell us some things. It'll be a little bit of a long segment, and we'll come in and out, but she's going to share some things that I think are under the radar. What's going on with the Ukraine war? What's going on between America and Europe? Specifically, what's going on between Donald Trump and the UK? Because we're doing some things. How does that tie into the war on cartels? Because we're not just talking about drug cartels. We're talking about cartels of finance, cartels of industry, like pharmaceutical and medical. These these bastardized monster behemoths, that have overtaken our lives and in some ways rule countries. Like, why in the world would we let big tobacco, in the middle of getting sued for billions of dollars for making cigarettes more addictive and lying to everybody about it? Well, let's just let them buy food and make food more addictive. And then they'll go buy the pharmaceutical companies and the food companies and the farms, And so you've got all those actors in there. And who are these people? Why is Bill Gates buying farmland in America? Why is China buying farmland in America? And it's like, wake the F up, people. Wake up. We are not at a point where at this point, the frog is boiling and he is about to get eaten. We have got to stop, step back, and at least see the play for us being played the way that they're playing us. So this is Susan Kokinda. This is it's about 14 minutes. We won't listen to the whole things, but bear with me. She's so good. I'm not going to take her thunder. She's really something else. So this is not about missiles. It's about a quote unquote boring document that just ended the UK's financial control over America. Okay. Sounds conspiratorial, right? It's like, oh, wow. But she brings the goods. And then you've got NATO generals that are screaming for war. You've got MI6 coming out of the shadows. Russia's calling them out. But there are some things that are going on that I don't think the average media has the dang brain in their head to understand this stuff. So she's very valuable, but a lot of them wouldn't want to report it anyway. But let's listen to her, and we'll stop a few times along the way, but see if you can follow.
The British Empire is panicked. NATO chiefs, British generals, even the head of MI6 coming out of the shadows, all screaming for escalation with Russia. They want you to look at the missiles. They want you to think that this is about territory or democracy. Well, it's not. They're not afraid of Russia. They're afraid of a PDF file released quietly in Washington last week, which signals the silent assassination of their entire financial model. The weapon that is terrifying London isn't a hypersonic missile. It's this. Now, it sounds boring, it looks bureaucratic, but inside these pages is the end of the City of London's mandate to loot the American economy. Don't let the name fool you. This is the economic equivalent of a declaration of war on the financier elite. It declares that from now on, people and economic growth come first, not financial parasites. And it comes right on the heels of the administration's national security strategy, which declares that sovereign nations come first, not globalist institutions. These were released within a week of each other, and these two documents reassert that American principles will now govern us.
So, stopping real quick, the FSOC is one of the documents, and then the National Security Strategy of the United States of America is the other document. They're both like annual reports. One, the National Security Strategy came out in November of 25, and the FSOC, it just came out, the 2025 annual report. And she'll keep talking about it. So let's get going.
Not imperial principles. I'm Susan Kokinda. This has been a battle that I've been part of since the 1970s. But I've seen how the British start wars and create narratives to keep you in the dark. It's time for all of this to come into the light, and that's what we're going to do today.
All right, so we'll keep going. She's going to go into a preview, and then she's going to keep going. And I hope you guys will hang with me on this. This is this is really something cool. I've watched it several times.
So here's what we're going to cover today. How London's panic is out in the open, and the Russians know it. What Trump's new economic strategy is, people, not bankers, first. And that phase one of that strategy is the war against the cartels. So Trump's current pressure campaign on Ukraine is forcing Europe, and in particular the British, right out in the open. So open that they're telling their people to prepare for war. Over the past week, Trump has been brutally honest with Zelensky. You're losing, you need to hold elections, and oh, by the way, you're completely corrupt. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump team is telling Zelensky, either you negotiate on territory or you get no security guarantees. Now, this also reflects the reality of Trump's new national security strategy that I covered last week. Trump is no longer operating under the transatlantic alliance playbook. As one dispirited European diplomat blurted out at a DC Christmas party, The Western alliance is over. The relationship will never be the same again. So the split is out in the open, and Trump is pushing a negotiated settlement which recognizes Russia's legitimate interests. But the Europeans keep egging Zelensky to continue the war. And the British are the most overt. Look at this general on Sky News. He didn't talk about peace. He warned that the United Kingdom's sons and daughters need to be ready to fight.
Perhaps the most obvious impact on all of us will be the cost of building this resilience. Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means.
All right, so that, sorry, that's a little sloppy, but we'll keep going on this. It's very important. So what I'm learning more and more is that the elites in Europe never stopped their desire to return to the old world order, which is elite rulers and a bunch of peasant people who the fruits of our labor supply them their lifestyle. So all these rules, all these things they do, they have no intent. None of that even matters to them. It's a means of control. It's a means of fencing us in and controlling us and limiting our opportunity. And so, you know, when you listen to that kind of guy, he's sitting over there, what we do is whatever. It's like, who are you speaking for? Like, what's going on in the UK right now is absolutely insane. Are you following it since the Mel Blackwell Experience? We've talked about it for months now, that they are losing their sovereignty. Look at what happened at Brown, where the sweet girl from Mountain Brook, Alabama, got shot in the head. And I don't know if you've watched those people, but talking about DEI, these people are incompetent. The law enforcement there at Brown College, idiots. There's no other word for it. I'm sorry it sounds so mean, but I wouldn't put them in charge of an ant farm, much less a bunch of our kids who are up there hopefully trying to learn. You know, so if you look at that and you're looking at DEI in action, these are not capable people. The number one thing you want is capable people that fit our culture and that intend to do well. And so let's continue listening to her, and I'll let her speak for herself.
It's not just the military. The new head of MI6, whose grandfather, by the way, was on the side of the Ukrainian Nazis, warned, "We are now operating in a space between peace and war. We all continue to face the menace of an aggressive, expansionist, and revisionist Russia seeking to subjugate Ukraine and harass NATO. But Putin should be in no doubt our support is enduring. The pressure we apply on Ukraine's behalf will be sustained."
All right, that speech
Guess
was
who else
December 15th.
sees that it is the British who are keeping the war going? Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, and they're saying the quiet part out loud, as this headline shows, that they say that it's the United Kingdom which is undermining Trump's Ukraine peace efforts. And they also report that the United Kingdom has pushed the European Union to seize Russian assets, not just to fund Ukraine, but to kill any U.S.-led settlement. And they also report that it's the United States which was opposed to that. So the real strategic battle lines have not been this clear in a century. Britain is pushing war, the United States is pushing peace, and Russia is fingering the British. Now, we've established that the British are openly preparing for war while Trump pushes peace. But here's where most coverage stops, and where we're just getting started. The real question is, why are they so desperate? What makes the British establishment willing to risk their own sons and daughters in a shooting war with a nuclear power? It's not ideology, it's not democracy, it's something much more concrete and much more vulnerable. Because when the empire starts talking openly about war, it's because they're losing economic control. Now, if you want to understand the economic war behind the shooting war, I want you to go to Promethean Action and subscribe to our free newsletter, because we don't just show you the battlefield that most people miss. We show you how to win the war. Because what I'm about to show you next is the document that has London more terrified than they are of any Russians. It's the Financial Stability Oversight Council 2025 Annual Report.
FSOC.
For decades, financial stability in the United States has meant one thing: save the big money center banks at all costs, bail out Wall Street, protect the derivatives markets. Meanwhile, the real economy, manufacturing, wages, household income, this is all sacrificed to keep the casino running. But the 2025 FSOC report flips this on its head. It explicitly prioritizes economic stability and security and household income stability over the financial system. Treasury Secretary Bessent drilled down on that when he addressed the Financial Stability Oversight Council on December 11. He said, "The twin priorities of economic growth and economic security will guide the Council's future approach to identifying priorities." Now remember that. Twin priorities of economic growth and security. Then, in his chairperson's letter of introduction, Bessent said, "Economic security requires the U.S. financial system to reliably provide the resources necessary to enable the real economy to support domestic production capacity, American standard of living, and our core values."
All right, so I'll pause real quick. So I know that all of us have said, man, Trump will come out and he'll be like, prices are great, everything's getting better. And if you're a guy that's really at the top of something like a Trump or any major leader or anybody of a major company, sometimes you are ahead of everybody because you can see all the what's being done, all the levers. Well, this is one that's flying under the radar, and I think it's fascinating that she is coming out with this, and it gets even better. But keep this in mind. So Bessent, who I absolutely love, I think this administration has got some amazing people in it. But he's basically saying that, hey, man, the game is up. So the backroom, smoky bar with all the cigar smoking guys, they've been lying to our face about, elect me and I'll take care of you. And we're going to have no. All this was already about elites. It's always been about them. And the battle's been between us and America and our republic trying to use our power just as a common voter and a common man and woman and, a Judeo-Christian nation. And all of this stuff that's been done to Europe and to America, flooding us with all this crap, whether it's illegal immigrants, DEI, just defund the police and just getting everybody to be ists and hate each other and the grievance, train and all that sort of stuff. It's a culture killer is what it is. It's a culture killer. It'll destroy the culture of a country. It doesn't matter what country. And when you take the white man, the black man, the men in general, and every man has some form of beat down on them so that they don't step up and be the man that it takes to lead their family and to do the right thing and to be able to make a living and be the bread provider and all that sort of thing. Well, now you can see that Trump and Bessent are doing something out in wide open, and the Europeans jaw is on the ground. They have put in writing this document, and Bessent is out there saying pretty much economic security requires the United States financial system to reliably provide the resources necessary to enable the real economy to support domestic production capacity, making stuff in America, that's what he's saying, Americans' standard of living, and our core values. Dang, I'm loving that. Man, I'm going to read it again. Economic security requires the United States financial system to reliably provide the resources necessary to enable the real economy to support domestic production capacity, Americans' standard of living, and our core values. You damn Skippy, Scott. So let's let her keep going. This is just great.
And the report also announces the creation of a new household resiliency working group to give priority to people in households, not just financial entities. Now, a normal person would think that all these things are no-brainers. That's what a government should be doing. But here's the brutal truth. That hasn't been the policy of the FSOC. Its policy has been to save the financial parasites. So this report is as revolutionary as the new national security strategy. And to understand just how revolutionary this financial report is, you need to know where the FSOC came from, And here's something that should get your blood boiling. Who was deeply involved in the policy fights over the shape of the post-2008 crash world when Dodd-Frank was being shaped? Lord Peter Mandelson, in his role as EU Trade Commissioner, and Larry Summers, Obama's National Economic Council Director. Lord Mandelson, Tony Blair's right-hand man, one of the most connected figures in the City of London, and until recently, Britain's ambassador to the Trump administration before he was sacked because of his Epstein ties. And Larry Summers, who was just outed for his Epstein connections and had to resign from his position at Harvard. So for all those people who have wanted to see the names in the Epstein files, here's two pretty big ones, Mandelson and Summers, key architects of Dodd-Frank, which protected the offshore British-controlled financial model. And now the FSOC, the institution they created to protect their financial power, is being retooled to grow the real economy and protect American households. Coincidence? You decide. But this new report is just part of a total reshaping of the U.S. economy along these people-first lines. Yesterday, Vice President Vance spoke in Pennsylvania about what the Trump administration is doing for American families.
I remember what it's like when you have to choose between putting food on the table or getting the prescription that you need to stay healthy. And that is not a life that Donald Trump or I want for the citizens in the greatest country in the world. We don't want a single parent or grandparent to have to look at their checking account and decide whether they're going to buy food or whether they're going to buy medicine this month. We are fighting for you every single day.
Now, in there, JD hit two critical pain points: food and health care. And add to that housing, and you immediately run into the bigs. Big ag, big pharma, big finance. In other words, the cartels. Cartels are a cornerstone of an imperial financialized system where real economic activity is sacrificed to feed a financial income stream that feeds the mega institutions. And the result is inflation, a hollowed-out economy, and no middle class.
Okay, so I'm going to let her keep going. So what I was getting to earlier was that we're all sitting around going, all right, hey, what are we going to do to get this economy back in place? I mean, COVID was a disaster. We all got boiled like frogs. Everybody did something stupid. I mean, whatever it is, nobody just feels perfect about COVID, right? And then you have these prices are sky high. You go out to eat, and it's like, Lord have mercy, I can't hardly afford to take family of six out to eat. And so the question for ourselves is, what is the Trump administration really doing to address livability, right? And livability includes safety. It includes not having your daughter or your son or your wife or your husband discriminated against or something that they can't help. You know what I mean? Not having DEI, not having all of these stupid things that have ingrained themselves in the culture of our companies and our country. But here you can see now some of the brilliance between what Trump and Besant and this administration, and there's a lot of others working on it, are trying to do to potentially paradigm shift, tectonic plate shift kind of stuff to be able to really position America to go back to a republic that puts its people first, because that's what it is supposed to do. That's not controversial. But for the history of mankind, no government does that. They talk you into giving them the power, and then they become elites and you become a peasant. That's same old ways, new days. So keep that in mind. What you're hearing here now is getting down to the very foundation roots of what Donald Trump and Besant and his administration might be doing to position America away from the European elites, the global elites, the people that have been raping and pillaging and rigging our systems and our financial institutions and lying to our faces. And I guarantee you these are the very same people where all of this DEI and all of these different isms and schisms and, Islamism invasions and everything they've done to try to bury us is to be able to get a weak enough populace to take control. And Trump is going into the cushiest of the cushiest, highest part of the country club and walking in there and throwing this thing down on the table. And these people they're crapping bricks.
And that's what this administration is taking head on in critical areas. Start with food. The administration has targeted the beef cartels. Peter Navarro just did a very powerful 1-minute video on X explaining how 4 massive conglomerates, many with deep foreign ties, have controlled over 80% of our beef supply. They underpay the rancher, overcharge you at the grocery store, and that's the definition of a colonial economic policy. The new directive from the administration targets this monopoly directly, treating food security as national security. The second target is Big Pharma and the insurance companies. This is the crown jewel of a financialized economy. They don't produce health, they produce bills. Trump and the team led by RFK Jr. have taken on Big Pharma like no one ever has, and Trump minces no words when it comes to the insurance companies. Here's how Vance put it yesterday.
One of the things the president has said is we have the weirdest health insurance system in the world, where we tax money from all of these great Americans out here, and then we give boatloads of money to the insurance companies. Why don't we give that money to the American people and let them buy insurance that works for them and their families?
Third, housing. The FSOC report makes it clear. Household income stability is the goal, but you can't have stable households when BlackRock and foreign hedge funds are buying up entire neighborhoods to turn America into a nation of renters.
Amen.
And the administration has compared the big home building companies to OPEC and challenged them to start building.
That's right.
And finally, the most dangerous cartel of all, the narco-trafficking cartel. Now, it would take a whole broadcast in itself, but the important thing to remember is that all of Trump's actions, declaring fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, hitting the Venezuelan drug boats, and everything else he's doing on this front, this doesn't just hit at the tragic consequences of drugs. This goes straight at the trillions of dollars of dirty money, which keeps the City of London-centered financial system afloat. See the pattern? Beef, pharma, housing, dope. These aren't just industries, legal or otherwise. They are extraction and control mechanisms of the British system. And breaking them up isn't just good economics. It's a strategic blow to the empire.
All right, so one more segment of her talking after this, but did you know that? I mean, you read the conspiracy theories, and we've all got that friend, and, there's times if you listen very long, you're like, wow, there's a lot of, I don't know, that maybe you're right. But this is why she's so important, is she knows her stuff, and she doesn't build a big fire over all this. It's just very, here's the facts. The British system has been corrupt, and it's had a control over the cartels that rule America. And those are those cartels that she mentioned. It's not just drugs. But then you have the bedfellows in America that get in bed with that too, and you've got the club. There's your elites, and that's where all these things are coming from to try to undermine the sovereignty of the republic in America, our baby crib, our culture. They're trying to poison our culture. They're trying to pit us all against each other. They're trying to basically destroy the republic and go back to the age-old ways of they rule and we get ruled. And that's the way it is. But let's keep checking her out. She's got one final closing point.
So when you see the headlines about World War III, don't just look at missiles. Look at the money. When you hear British spooks preparing the population for war, understand what they're really defending. A centuries-old system of financial control that is dying. The 2025 FSOC report is a declaration. It says we're done prioritizing your casinos over our people. And it partners with the National Security Strategy, which declares that we're done sacrificing our manufacturing base to your free trade doctrine. Trump isn't just stopping a war in Ukraine. He's stopping the mechanism that creates those wars. And he's reviving the American system of builders, producers, and creators. The British Empire, whether you call it the City of London, Davos, or the rules-based order, cannot survive that revival. This is the economic war behind the shooting war. And it's a war the British establishment cannot afford to lose, because if they do, it's game over. This is why you need to join Promethean Action as a subscriber or a paying member. We're building a movement to understand this fight, and a movement that knows how to win it.
All right. So that is at PrometheanAction.com. Promethean is PROMETHEAN action. PrometheanAction.com. And I've subscribed a while back, and I just find her really interesting. And she's very, very knowledgeable. It's Susan Kokinda. So on X, she's at SJ Kokinda. And then you can also follow Promethean Action on X. But isn't that fascinating? And so, sometimes you're in the rigged game, but you're not at the table, man. And I'm not either. And, at this level, you're talking very, very small room. But I would ask you to keep a look on the various different bedfellows and, pray for Trump and pray for Scott Bessent and pray for our administration, because all of this is weaved together. And, there's days you go to bed and you're like, I just don't know if anybody can ever pull this off. We're up against such evil forces. And these are the invisible forces that they tell you don't exist. And then it attracts a kind of a subculture of useful idiots that are spreading, not very intelligent or accurate conspiracy theories. But sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. It's like, wow, you people have been rigging this game. And you can knock them down, and they just come right back together. They just regenerate meaner than ever. And so to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll go out with something funny here, and everybody will go enjoy a wonderful week of Christmas. But with what James Stewart was talking about, was when you go and you're trying to do something special, you just don't ever know what's going to really make that impact. What's going to be the memorable thing? What are you going to be remembered for? But you definitely want it to be you at your best. You want to be being your best self. You want to be doing your best work. And whether you're just one person on a team and you're really not leading anybody, or whether you're leading one team, or whether you lead all the teams as the senior executive, doing your best work, trying to be your best self, creating that best pledge in the company, helping people improve and helping them grow and giving them responsibility, and they can grow in stature and financial capability, getting away from DEI and these horrible things that you just, one day you're going to answer to God, and God's going to look at you and say, did you not realize that was wrong? Just because everybody told you it was right, you didn't have a barometer that says this is wrong. So those of us with the power in business, we need to rake aside the leeching and bloodletting of DEI and discrimination and just push it aside, and let's go do the right thing the right way, and let's look for the best candidate. It doesn't matter. And don't be afraid to apply the cultural elements of how to build a dynamic culture in business to your own country, to your own town, to your own neighborhood. If it's not safe, well, dadgummit, put your foot down and let's make it safe again. If you don't have safety and security, what do you have? If your wife or kid or yourself, you're walking down the street and you get knocked in the head and killed by some thug that doesn't even belong here. And then don't be afraid to call out the truth, which is some people do not belong in a particular culture. And the American culture is worth preserving. The aquarium of America, we should not apologize for having it. It is one of the most rare and fundamentally powerful things humans ever invented, was the Republic of America, the United States of America. And it's worth fighting for, and that culture is worth protecting. And we need to root out and get rid of all this stuff that these same invisible, people that are in the elite of the elite of the elites, controlling the money and the cartels of everything, and poison us with stuff that you look at it and you go, okay, this looks like they poisoned us. Oh, I sound crazy. I'm going to have to go outside and kick a rock, And so what I'm saying is, between now and our next podcast, let's all get our head around what's going on. Call a spade, see it like it is. Don't be afraid to face the reality of what's going on. And it's really pretty easy just to unite around what's doing right, the truth, and saving the culture of America, which is the shining city on a hill that if 3% of all of mankind had the ability to live in a free, self-governed life, how small of a fraction of that got to live in America, like you and me? Wow. All right. Before we go out, I want to listen to this. This is really good, and then we'll go out with something funny. But check this out.
As in a mother's womb were two babies, and one turns to the other and says, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" And the other replies, "Why, of course, there has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There's no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" "I don't know," said the second, "but there'll be more light than here. Maybe we'll walk with our legs and eat with our mouths. Maybe we'll have other senses we can't understand now." First goes, "That's ridiculous. Walking is impossible, and eating with our mouths, that's absurd. The umbilical cord is what scientifically supplies nutrition and all that we need, but it's far too short. Life after delivery is to be logically excluded." And the second says, "What if it's just different than it is here? Maybe we don't need that physical cord anymore." The first goes, "Okay, if there were life after delivery, then tell me, why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere." And the second says, "But certainly we'll meet Mother, and she'll take care of us." The first goes, "Mother? You actually believe in Mother? If Mother exists, where is she now?" And the second goes, "She's all around us. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist." And the first says, "I don't see her. It's only logical that she's not here." To which the second replied, "Sometimes, when you're in silence and you really listen, you can perceive her presence. You can hear her loving voice calling down from above."
That's fascinating. I don't know if you guys have seen that before, but it's called "It's a Miracle" by Max Stossel, and it's pretty cool. Anyway, all right, let's go out with something funny here. All right, I want to go out with an oldie but a goodie. You know, I love Norm Macdonald, and I know I've used this one before, but it's just so funny. So Norm Macdonald, everyone.
Afraid the news, put all these stories on Iraq, Iran, North Korea, try to scare you, But does it ever really scare you? Like, you ever wake up in the middle of the night, North Korea! That little tiny country across the ocean. I wonder if they'll get me. Plus, didn't MASH settle that like 20 years ago? Why'd I have to watch that stupid show? There is one country that worries me, though. Not Iraq, not Iran, not North Korea. The only country that really worries me is the country of Germany. I don't know if you guys are history buffs or not, but... in the early part of the previous century, Germany decided to go to war. And who did they go to war with? The world. That had never been tried before. And so you figure that would take about 5 seconds for the world to win, but no, it was actually close. Then about 30 years pass, and Germany decides again to go to war, and again it chooses as its enemy the world. And this time they have that guy, Schrankly, Crankly, that guy, and I'm not even going to dignify him by saying his name, but I think you know what I'm talking about. But you'd think at that point the world will go, listen, Germany, here's the deal. You don't get to be a country no more on account of you keep attacking the world. What do you think, you're Mars or something?
Oh, man, that's really good. All right, well, look, I hope you guys enjoyed the Mel Blackwell Experience here the week before Christmas. And remember, Jesus is the reason for the season. We'll pick this back up after Christmas. Cheers.